Our journey begins not with a war or a king, but with a map. An old, dusty map, the kind you might find tucked away in the forgotten archives of a grand library. But as you look closer, something remarkable comes into focus. On this map, and so many others like it from the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, a vast and powerful name is etched across the Eurasian continent: Tartary. It isn't a small kingdom, a provincial backwater, or a collection of nomadic tribes. No, it is a truly enormous landmass, dwarfing nations we consider historical giants. It stretches from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean, encompassing Siberia, Central Asia, and parts of China. On these maps, it is marked as a singular, unified entity, Tartary, or Great Tartary. But here is the central mystery. Where did it go? If you pick up a modern map today, you will not find Tartaria. It has been systematically erased, replaced by the names of smaller, more familiar countries. Did an entire empire, a landmass larger than any other, simply cease to exist? Did its people, its culture, its history just evaporate into thin air? The official narrative tells us that Tartary was a generic term used by European cartographers to denote the lands inhabited by various Mongol and Turkic peoples, a wild, uncivilized land with no central power. But this explanation is a lie of convenience, a simplified cover story that doesn't hold up to scrutiny. Let's look at the evidence. The maps themselves, they are not crude, speculative sketches. They are often incredibly detailed, showing not just land masses, but cities, rivers, and mountains. The famous maps of Abraham Ortelius and Gerardus Mercator are the same cartographers who mapped the world we know today, depict Tartary with an air of authority, as a definitive political entity. Why would they invest such detail in a mythical, non-existent land? Consider also the scale of what we are told. We are meant to believe that this vast, unified territory was a collection of disorganized tribes, yet its name appears alongside established empires like the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Chinese Empire. It's listed not as Land of the Tartars, but as the Empire of Tartary, implying a central authority, a government, and a level of organization that a loose confederation of nomads simply could not have. The maps are not the only pieces of evidence. Historical accounts and encyclopedias from the period also speak of a sophisticated culture. The 1771 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, for example, has an extensive entry on Tartary that describes a highly organized society. They speak of a people with advanced knowledge, grand cities, and a level of societal structure that completely contradicts the nomadic tribesman narrative. This was not a people living in tents and moving from place to place. This was a civilization with permanent settlements, with an infrastructure so developed it must have spanned continents. And what of the cities? Old engravings and sketches of Tartarian cities show breathtaking architecture. Not the crude, simple buildings of a primitive people, but stunning neoclassical structures adorned with domes, arches, and intricate carvings. Buildings that look almost identical to the grand, impossible architecture we see in major cities today. Buildings that we are told were built by a later generation with vastly superior technology. Was this architecture a blueprint, a standard that was replicated across the globe by the Tartarian Empire? So, if Tartaria was a real empire, what happened to it? The evidence points to a massive, deliberate act of historical erasure. Sometime in the 19th century, after a major global event, we'll get into that later, the name Tartaria began to fade from maps. It was replaced by a more fragmented view of the world, a patchwork of new nations and territories. It's a textbook example of a historical reset. The powerful new order, whoever they were, wanted to hide the existence of a free energy, technologically advanced, and a globally unified civilization, they needed to create a new narrative, one of humanity climbing slowly from the mud rather than falling from a great height. The very idea that a global, technologically advanced empire could exist just a few centuries ago is a terrifying concept for those who control our current narrative. It suggests that our history is not a continuous line of progress, but a series of catastrophic cycles. It suggests that what we call modern technology is not a new invention, but a rediscovered piece of a forgotten past. The story of Tartaria is not just about a missing empire, it's a call to question everything. It's a reminder that the world we see today, with its borders, its conflicts, and its official histories, is not the only reality. It's a reality that was built upon a deliberate act of forgetting. The maps of the smoking gun, the first clue in a global conspiracy. They show us a world that once was a world where humanity was united, technologically advanced, and perhaps much closer to its true potential than we are today. So as you close your eyes, let this thought linger. What else has been hidden? What other truths lie buried beneath the sands of time, waiting for us to uncover them? The maps have vanished, but the truth they reveal, the truth of a lost super civilization, remains, and it is waiting for you to find it. In our last journey, we looked at the maps, those faded scrolls and dusty atlases that revealed a lost name, a vanished empire. We saw the evidence of a world that existed just a few centuries ago, a unified civilization known as Tartaria. But a name on a map is just a whisper. Where is the physical proof? The stone and steel, the brick and mortar that would tell us this forgotten empire was real? The answer, my friend, is not above ground. It's beneath your feet. Take a walk through any old city, in any corner of the world. Look at the grand neoclassical buildings that line the streets of New York, Paris, or St. Petersburg. You've seen them 1,000 times, but have you ever truly looked at them? Have you noticed the oddities? The windows that seem to be cut off at the ground level, half buried in the sidewalk? The intricate, beautifully carved doorways that lead to nothing but a flight of stairs going down to a subterranean room? The majestic domed edifices that look like they're sinking, their bottom floors now serving as basements with windows peeking out just above the pavement? Official history tells us these are design quirks, that the roads were raised over time or that the buildings simply settled. But what if this isn't a quirk of architecture, but a scar of a global catastrophe? What if these are not basements at all, but the first floors of a civilization buried by a cataclysmic mudflood? This is the central question of this chapter, and it invites us to look at the world around us with new eyes, to see not a story of slow, gradual progress, but a chronicle of sudden, violent, and universal destruction. Let's travel back in time through the lens of old photography. Look at the black and white photos of America in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. We see massive, ornate buildings, the kind we're told were built by a fledgling nation of pioneers and cowboys, but they stand in a sea of dirt and rubble. Often, the street level is several feet below the doors of the building. Men and women in period dress are seen standing on newly constructed wooden boardwalks, looking down into what appear to be dug-out foundations. Yet the foundations look perfectly finished, with windows and arches that suggest they were never meant to be underground. This is the evidence of the mudflood theory. It suggests a global event, a deluge of a fine clay-like earth that settled in every valley and filled every basin, burying the lower stories of the pre-existing Tartarian structures. This wasn't a water flood, it was a mud flood. Imagine a substance so fine, so viscous, that it could flow through cities, seeping into every crack, every crevice, and every open window, slowly filling and hardening. Consider the old post office in your city, or the historic county courthouse. Next time you see one, look at its foundation. You will likely find windows that are now half buried, windows that would have once provided light to a ground level room. The official story is that the city simply built its streets higher over the decades, burying the original lower floors. But why would they do that? Why would a city so meticulously plan its new streets that they perfectly align to bury the most beautiful, intricate parts of its grandest buildings? The more you look, the more the official explanation feels like a convenient fabrication. The mud itself is a mystery. What kind of geological event could cause such a widespread global deposit? One theory suggests a cosmic event of plasma discharge from the sun, or a comet strike that superheated the Earth's crust, liquefying vast amounts of soil and rock into a fluidic mass that swept across the continents. Another suggests an engineered catastrophe, a deliberate act of geoengineering designed to wipe out an entire civilization and its technology. Think about the sheer scale. This isn't just about a few buildings in one city. This phenomenon has been documented in places as far-flung as Siberia, Australia, India, and across all of Europe and the Americas. It is a global mystery. The consistency of the mud is also strange. It's often found to be a hard, packed, clay-like substance that requires immense effort to excavate. It's as if the world was wrapped in a new layer, a dusty blanket that hid the truth of what came before. The mud flood wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a historical reset. It was a cleansing event that made it possible for the new powers to claim these grand buildings as their own, to stamp their own narrative on history. They would say, "Look at what our great-grandfathers built with bare hands and sheer determination." But what if they didn't build them? What if they simply unburied them, claimed them, and rewrote the story of their origins? The evidence of this rewriting is everywhere. Grand cathedrals and city halls, often the most ornate buildings, are the ones most consistently showing these signs of being partially buried. It's as if they were too majestic to tear down, so they were simply absorbed into the New World Order. The mud flood wasn't just about buildings, it was about people. What happened to the millions of citizens of the Tartarian Empire? The historical record is eerily silent on the matter. The theory suggests a massive loss of life, a depopulation event that left the world sparsely populated and ripe for a new power to take control. Those who survived were likely orphaned, disoriented, and left to fend for themselves in a world that had literally been turned on its head. This is where the story connects to another sinister mystery, the so-called orphan trains. In the late 19th century, thousands of children were taken from cities and sent across the country on trains to be relocated. Official history says these were homeless children from poor families. But what if they weren't? What if they were the traumatized, amnesiac survivors of the mud flood, their memories of a former technologically advanced life wiped clean, their minds prepped to be assimilated into the new, manufactured historical timeline? This chilling thought suggests that the mud flood was not just a geological event, but the first step in a grand orchestrated plan to erase humanity's true origins. The mud buried the cities, the new power claimed the buildings, and the children, the last living memory of the old world, were scattered and re-educated. The Great Mud Flood theory forces us to confront a horrifying possibility, that we are not the pinnacle of progress, but a remnant civilization living among the ruins of a more advanced world. It changes the way we look at everything. The ancient ruins, we are taught, were built by primitive people with ropes and pulleys, might have been part of the same global network as the neoclassical buildings in our cities today. The very foundations of our history, those first floors now buried beneath the soil, hold a secret that once revealed will change everything. So, next time you walk past an old building, don't just admire its beauty. Look down, look at the half-buried windows, question the narrative. The mud flood may be a conspiracy theory to some, but to those who have seen the evidence, it is a devastatingly simple explanation for a global mystery. It is the missing link between the forgotten maps and the impossible architecture that still stands tall, a silent monument to a world that was buried overnight. And it leads us to our next question. If these buildings were strong enough to survive such a cataclysm, who could have built them? Who were the master builders of the Tartarian Empire? Perhaps they were not human at all. Our next chapter will explore the myth of giants and impossible architecture. The Great Mudflood, a cataclysmic event we explored in our last chapter, left the world changed. It buried the first floors of a global civilization, but it didn't destroy everything. It left behind the most magnificent, the most intricate, and the most baffling structures we have ever seen. And as we look at these grand buildings, the libraries, the museums, the train stations, the government buildings, we are forced to ask a new and unsettling question: who built them? Consider the sheer scale. A building like Grand Central Terminal in New York or the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco. Official history claims these were built with late 19th century technology, steam engines, pulleys, and the sweat of countless laborers. But stand inside one of these marvels, look up at the impossibly high vaulted ceilings, gaze upon the solid monolithic columns carved from a single piece of stone. Consider the thousands of tons of marble, granite, and steel that were moved and assembled with a level of precision that even modern technology struggles to replicate. The official story simply doesn't add up. Why would a fledgling society, a civilization supposedly just a few decades removed from horse-drawn carriages and candles, build structures of such unbridled grandeur? Why the soaring arches, the massive archways, the doors that seem too tall for any human? They are not built to a human scale, they are built to the scale of giants. This is not just a theory, it is an observation of a constant architectural anomaly. Walk down the streets of London or Washington, D.C., and you will see buildings with ground floor doors that are disproportionately tall, often with smaller, more modern doors fitted within them. It's as if a new generation of builders, smaller in stature, took over the structures of a previous race and had to adapt them for their own use. The grand staircases, the monumental statues, the colossal halls, they all whisper the same forbidden secret, that they were not constructed for us. They were built for giants, a race of beings that once walked the earth. This idea might sound like a fairy tale, but it is one found in the myths and legends of nearly every culture on the planet, from the Greek Titans and the Norse Jotuns to the biblical Nephilim described in the book of Genesis as mighty men of old, men of renown. Stories of giants coexisting with or even predating humanity are a universal theme. Were these just cautionary fables, or were they a collective memory of a real people, the master builders and architects of the Tartarian Empire? Imagine a world where the builders possessed not only an advanced technology we have yet to rediscover, but also the physical strength to manipulate materials with ease. The intricate carvings on these buildings, the ornate reliefs, the flawless statues would not be the work of a painstaking human artist over decades, but of a being with the dexterity and power to shape stone and metal with incredible speed and precision. The theory suggests that the Tartarian civilization was a harmonious one, built on the principles of free energy, which we will explore later, and a deep understanding of natural law. The giants, with their immense stature and possibly superior intellect, were the keepers of this knowledge. They were the architects of a world of beauty and efficiency, a world that was systematically erased. The colossal size of the buildings was not for show. It was for function. It was perfectly scaled for their inhabitants. The grand domes and high ceilings, which modern historians claim were for acoustic purposes, might have simply been the standard design for a people who needed more vertical space. The massive windows, often stretching from floor to ceiling, would have let in an immense amount of light for beings with a different physical form. We are the ones living in a world of hand-me-downs, inhabiting the grand empty shells of a forgotten race. But what happened to them? The same event that caused the mudflood, the great cataclysm that reset our history, likely brought about the end of the giants. They were the most vulnerable to the very disaster they were designed to build against. Perhaps their bodies could not survive the altered atmospheric or geological conditions, or perhaps their physical form made them a specific target of the new power that sought to wipe the slate clean. The giant skeletons and artifacts that are supposedly found and quickly hidden by archaeologists are a persistent part of this narrative. While official science dismisses these as hoaxes or misidentified animal remains, to those who believe, they are the final tragic proof of a lost race. Their legacy, however, remains. Every time we walk through a grand city hall, a magnificent old library, or a beautiful abandoned building, we are walking in the footsteps of giants. We are touching the stones they laid and admiring the beauty they created. Their buildings stand as a testament to what humanity or a related species was capable of. They are the silent, unmoving evidence that our history is not what we think it is. The very fact that these structures survived the mud flood speaks to their incredible durability. They were not built with flimsy materials, but with a deep understanding of physics and a mastery of a construction technique that seems lost to us today. This leads us to our next clue, a symbol that is found on countless buildings and at the heart of an even deeper mystery. In a world of chaos, a perfect shape emerges from the earth, the star fort. And so we must ask, were these star forts simply military fortifications, or were they something much, much more? A network of power, an intricate grid that provided the energy for the giants' world? We will explore this hidden secret in our next chapter, Star Forts and the Mystery of Free Energy. We've walked through the ghost cities of the mudflood, and we've marveled at the impossible architecture of the giants. But in this tangled web of forgotten history, there's another piece of the puzzle, a silent and haunting mystery that is scattered across the entire globe, the star forts. At first glance, these structures seem simple enough. Officially, they are a marvel of Renaissance-era military engineering. The story goes that they were meticulously designed, star-shaped fortifications, with their many points allowing for interlocking fields of fire that would protect them from all angles against attacking armies. The symmetry is meant to be a testament to the tactical genius of their builders, but as we've learned, the official narrative often hides a far more astonishing truth. Look at the map of these forts. They are everywhere, from the heart of Europe to the shores of America, from isolated islands to the middle of sprawling continents. They appear in places with no strategic value, in areas where no armies would ever have fought, and many of them are so perfectly geometric, so precisely constructed, that they seem less like a military base and more like a symbol, a blueprint of something else entirely. What if their purpose was not to protect from an attack, but to harness an unseen force? What if their perfect fractal-like geometry was not for defense, but for drawing power from the very air we breathe? The global energy grid. The theory suggests that the star forts were not fortresses, but part of a sophisticated planet-wide energy grid, a network that provided limitless, clean, and free energy to the entire Tartarian Empire. The star shape itself is a natural form, a pattern found in crystals and in nature. The star fort, made of stone and earth, was a massive receiver, a condenser that could harness the ambient atmospheric electricity. Think of the earth not as a lifeless rock, but as a giant, living capacitor, buzzing with a constant, natural, electrical charge. The Tartarians, with their advanced knowledge, understood this. They knew how to tap into this endless source of power. The star forts were their power plants, their generators, but without the need for fuel, pollution, or combustion. This is where the forgotten dreams of men like Nikola Tesla come into chilling focus. Tesla, who spoke of a world powered by a single Warden Cliff Tower, who demonstrated wireless energy transmission and dreamed of a future where electricity was a free and universal right. Was Tesla simply rediscovering a technology that had been lost for centuries? Was his dream a memory of a time that was deliberately erased? The architecture of power. Now, look back at the grand architecture we discussed in our last chapter. The domes, the spires, the obelisks, they are not just decorative. In the Tartarian theory, these were not just aesthetic flourishes, they were part of the same energy system. The domes, often made of copper, were receivers, gathering the energy wirelessly transmitted from the star forts. The spires and antennas on top of these buildings weren't for lightning rods, they were for communication and power distribution. Every grand building was a node on a massive global free energy internet. This explains the incredible, impossible speed with which the Tartarian Empire could have built and powered its world. It wasn't the brute force of giants alone, it was a synergy of advanced technology and a deep understanding of natural law. A world where everyone had access to energy, where cities could light up the night, where transportation was effortless, and where technology was used for the betterment of all. A true golden age, powered by the very air they breathed. But the most compelling evidence lies in the subtle details. Many of these forts, when excavated, reveal bizarre tunnels and chambers, often filled with water. Why would a military fort need this? The theory suggests these were part of the energy generation process, using water, a natural conductor, to amplify the effect. The very cannons on the ramparts, so we are told, may not have been for firing projectiles, but for a much more sinister purpose, discharging plasma or energy bursts, a technology we are just beginning to understand today, a cataclysm of silence. So, if this global energy grid existed, what happened to it? The same global cataclysm that caused the great mudflood and wiped out the giants. It's plausible that this event was not an accident but a deliberate attack on this global energy network, a cosmic or engineered short circuit that caused a cascade failure, turning a world of harmony into a wasteland. The mudflood wasn't just dirt, it was the geological fallout of a planetary scale energy weapon. The new power that emerged from the ashes of the Tartarian Empire knew they could not allow this technology to continue. Free energy meant independence. It meant no one could be controlled. So they set about dismantling it. They didn't just bury the cities, they repurposed the technology. The star forts, the grand buildings, the entire system was stripped of its power, generating capabilities. The knowledge of how it worked was meticulously erased, and a new narrative, one of scarcity, of combustion engines, of controlled energy grids was born. The silence that now envelops these star forts is not the silence of abandonment, it is the silence of suppression. They stand as a tragic and infuriating monument to a stolen future, a future where we could have lived in abundance, free from the burdens of centralized power and corporate greed. The very ground beneath your feet, once humming with a vibrant, limitless energy, is now silent. This monumental cover-up needed a final public-facing act, a grand spectacle to convince the survivors that all that remained of the old world was now gone, and that a new, modern world was taking its place. That final act took place in the form of the World's Fairs, a grand spectacle that was, in reality, the last and most public act of historical erasure. It is here that we will find our next clue, a cover-up in plain sight. We have explored the lost maps of an empire that vanished, and the colossal architecture of a people who were erased. We have pondered the star forts and the incredible possibility of a global, free energy grid that was systematically dismantled. But for a conspiracy of this magnitude to succeed, it needed more than just a cataclysm and a historical rewrite. It needed a final public-facing act. a grand spectacle to convince the survivors of the old world that all was new, all was modern, and all was in the hands of a new, powerful order. History remembers these events as a golden age of innovation, a celebration of human ingenuity, where nations gathered to showcase the latest inventions and cultural achievements. They were temporary, joyous, and filled with a sense of boundless progress. The most famous, like the Chicago World's Columbian Exposition of 1893 and the St. Louis World's Fair of 1904, featured entire white cities of magnificent neoclassical buildings that were erected for a few short months and then, so we are told, torn down with astonishing speed. But what if everything we know about the World's Fairs is a lie? What if they were not a celebration of the future, but a grand public execution of the past? What if those magnificent buildings were not built for the fairs at all, but were the last surviving remnants of the Tartarian Empire, cleaned up, repurposed, and then deliberately destroyed in plain sight? Let's look at the evidence that makes the official story crumble under its own weight. The economics of insanity. A modern building of even a fraction of the size and grandeur of the World's Fair structures would take years of meticulous planning and construction. Architects and engineers would spend countless hours on blueprints, and the cost would be staggering. Yet we are told that these vast, ornate cities of marble and stone were built in just a few short years and were meant to be temporary. No sane civilization would pour such a monumental amount of resources, millions upon millions of dollars, in today's currency, into structures designed to be demolished just months later. It defies all logic and economic sense. The plaster and lath lie. The official explanation for the temporary nature of the buildings is that they were cheap facades made of a material called staff, a mixture of plaster, cement, and fiber. This is the cornerstone of the cover-up. But a close look at old photographs and first-hand accounts reveals a different story. These buildings look and feel like they are made of solid, enduring materials. Their intricate carvings, their massive columns, and their sheer weight suggest stone, not plaster. When they were torn down, the process was often violent and hurried, as if they were trying to hide the true nature of the materials. Why not carefully deconstruct them and reuse the valuable lumber or stone? Because they were not built to be taken apart, they were built to be destroyed, their secret origins erased forever. The fire, flood, and quake accidents. The destruction of these buildings often came with a convenient alibi, a sudden fire, a flash flood, or even an earthquake. The 1893 Chicago Fair saw multiple structures mysteriously burned to the ground. In St. Louis, the majestic festival hall and Cascade Gardens were simply demolished after the fair concluded, with no explanation as to why such a magnificent structure, supposedly a celebration of American ingenuity, was not preserved. These accidents were the perfect way to dispose of the evidence, leaving no stone unturned and no questions asked. The World's Fairs were a masterfully choreographed psychological operation. They were designed to act as a massive distraction while a new narrative was forced upon the surviving population. The distraction. While millions of people gawked at the new inventions in ethnic villages, the real work was happening just beyond the carnival rides and food stalls. Teams of workers were not building, they were demolishing. They were systematically dismantling the last physical remnants of a free, technologically advanced world. The grand free energy buildings from the old empire were being torn down brick by brick, replaced by the new controlled and monetized technology that was being showcased on the fairgrounds. The re-education. The fairs were not just about entertainment, they were about indoctrination. The exhibits taught a new fabricated history. They celebrated the progress from the steam engine to the electric bulb, conveniently skipping over the fact that a more advanced form of wireless atmospheric electricity had existed for centuries before. The fair was a propaganda tool designed to teach the survivors of the cataclysm that their ancestors were simple, primitive people and that the new powers were the benevolent masters of a new age of technology and progress. This new narrative allowed for the complete rewriting of our past. It created a blank slate. After the fairs, the majestic old buildings that we now see in our cities, the ones with the buried first floors and out of scale doors, were simply claimed and rebranded. A new historical timeline was written, one that said these buildings were built by the very same people who tore down their grander counterparts just a few blocks away. It is a deception so brazen, so audacious, that it is almost impossible to believe. The final pieces of the puzzle. The World's Fairs were the final crucial step in the Great Reset. The mudflood buried the past, the new powers took credit for the buildings, and the fairs provided a public stage for the final act of destruction and indoctrination. They were the bridge from the Tartarian Empire to the world we know today, a world where we are dependent on centralized power and manufactured scarcity. And what of the people? What of the lost generation of Tartarians? While the fairgrounds hummed with activity, the survivors of the old world, the orphan-trained children we spoke of earlier, were being paraded through the fairs as a curiosity before being scattered across the country. Their grand, civilized world was gone, replaced by a new, harsh reality. The fairs were not just about destroying buildings, they were about destroying memory. As you close your eyes and drift into the forbidden past, consider the colossal scale of this deception. The civilization erased from history, its magnificent buildings torn down in plain sight, and its memory replaced by a carnival of lies. The world's fairs were the ultimate crime, and we, the inheritors of this new world, are the unwitting witnesses. But the cover-up was not perfect. There are still clues left behind. The orphan trains, the secret societies, and the legacy of the old empire continued to whisper of a past they never wanted you to know about. And it all leads to our next terrifying question. If a cataclysm truly happened, was it a natural disaster, or was it an engineered reset? We will explore the answer in our next chapter, The Great Reset Theory. A deliberate erasure? We've walked the path of a forbidden history. We've seen the maps of a vanished empire, the cities buried by a mysterious flood, the colossal architecture that defies human scale, and the star forts that whisper of a stolen technology. We have seen the evidence of a conspiracy so vast, so audacious, that it seems impossible. But now, we must ask the most terrifying question of all. Why? And who is responsible? This is where we arrive at the heart of the matter, the Great Reset Theory, not as a simple political or economic event, but as a historical act of total civilizational erasure. This was not a random series of disasters. It was a meticulously planned operation by a powerful group that seized control in the chaotic aftermath of the global cataclysm. Their goal was simple, ruthless, and absolute: to wipe the slate clean and build a new world in their own image, one where they held all the power and humanity was utterly dependent on them. The mudflood was the tool, the world's fairs were the alibi, the rewriting of history was the grand finale, and the motive? It all comes down to control. Imagine a world like the Tartarian Empire, where free, abundant energy was available to all. The star forts, drawing power from the atmosphere, meant no one needed a central power grid. No one had to pay for electricity. This state of universal abundance is the antithesis of a hierarchical, power-driven society. A world with free energy is a world without masters. The group behind the Great Reset understood this perfectly. They knew that if humanity had access to limitless power, they would be self-sufficient, free to innovate, and impossible to control. The first, the most crucial step of their plan was to take away this power. The cataclysmic event, whether a weaponized energy burst or a naturally occurring disaster that they exploited, served to break the global energy grid. The subsequent mudflood buried the star forts and the power distributing infrastructure. The world was plunged into darkness, and the new powers could then emerge, offering a solution. This solution was a new, controlled technology. They introduced crude, centralized, and most importantly, profitable energy systems. The fossil fuel industry, the controlled electrical grid, the very systems we are reliant on today. This wasn't progress. It was technological devolution disguised as innovation. They created scarcity where there had been abundance, and dependence where there had been freedom. Next, they took control of knowledge. The Tartarian Empire was a civilization of advanced science, art, and philosophy. This knowledge, which could lead to another golden age, had to be erased. They systematically changed historical records, removed Tartaria from the maps, and created a new linear timeline of human progress, one that starts with primitive, ignorant people and slowly crawls forward, giving all credit to the new powers for every invention. They burned libraries, they destroyed historical documents, and they told a new story, a lie so grand that it became the truth we all learn in school. Finally, they took control of humanity itself. A society that had just survived a global catastrophe would have been traumatized and vulnerable. The survivors, the orphans of a lost world, were the final piece of the puzzle. The orphan trains were not charity. They were a form of psychological conditioning. These children, traumatized and disoriented, were scattered and adopted into new families, their memories of a past life, of free energy and advanced technology slowly fading away. They were re-educated, taught a new history, and integrated into a new subservient society. This was the most chilling part of the reset, the final erasure of the human spirit. The Great Reset theory is not just about the past, it is about our present. Its legacy is all around us. Look at the very structure of our civilization. It is built on centralization, central banks, centralized governments, and a centralized energy grid. This is the world that was constructed on the ashes of Tartaria, a world where a small group of elites could control the masses by controlling the flow of money, information, and power. The star forts, with their promise of a distributed free energy network, were the greatest threat to this control. Consider the many inventors and brilliant minds who, since the 19th century, have tried to reintroduce suppressed technology. Nikola Tesla, with his dream of wireless electricity, or others who have developed alternative energy systems only to be met with ridicule, professional ruin, or mysterious accidents. The Great Reset wasn't a one-time event. It is an ongoing policy of suppression. The masters of this new world will not allow us to rediscover the secrets of the old one. The contradictions in the historical record, the strange architectural anomalies, the unexplained fires, the missing years in our history are not coincidences. They are the cracks in the wall of a massive cover-up. The Tartarian Empire is the elephant in the room of human history, a constant, nagging question that haunts the very foundations of our knowledge. As you consider the possibility of a deliberate erasure, you must also consider what it means for our future. Are we living in another cycle, another turn of the wheel? Is the current chaos and societal upheaval a prelude to another reset, another chance for the hidden masters to take control and rewrite the story once more? The truth is that the Great Reset was not perfect. They couldn't tear down every building, burn every book, or erase every memory. They left clues for us to find, silent monuments to a lost world. The grand, magnificent buildings that still stand are a testament to what we once were and a promise of what we could be again. The story of Tartaria is not just a historical conspiracy. It is a call to awaken from a collective amnesia. It is an invitation to question the narrative, to see the world with a sense of wonder and suspicion, and to understand that our past is far more magnificent and far more tragic than we could ever imagine. The journey continues as we delve into the connections between Tartaria and another lost legend. Was the Tartarian Empire the lost echo of the legendary lost continent of Atlantis? We have journeyed through a world of buried cities and colossal architecture, a world of stolen energy and historical cover ups. We've seen the pieces of a puzzle so vast it reframes our entire understanding of humanity. But now, we must connect the final two pieces, two of the most enduring mysteries in the history of human consciousness. Tartaria, the forgotten empire of stone, and Atlantis, the mythical city of legend. For centuries, the story of Atlantis has been relegated to the realm of fiction. Plato's famous account of an advanced island civilization ruled by philosopher kings, with its magnificent cities of concentric circles and its mastery of a mystical metal called orichalcum, has been the subject of countless books and movies. It is a fairy tale, a cautionary tale of a technologically advanced society that was swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of fire and earthquakes. But what if the legend of Atlantis is not a myth at all? What if it is a memory, a fragmented, poetic account of the very same global cataclysm that gave us the mudflood? What if Tartaria was not just a separate, isolated empire, but the final, massive echo of the Atlantean civilization itself? What if the sinking of Atlantis wasn't the end of a single island, but the geological and societal collapse of a planetary civilization? This mind-bending connection asks us to see the legends not as fantasies but as clues. It asks us to consider that the Tartarian Empire, with its impossible buildings and its free energy grid, was the last great bastion of the Atlantean legacy, its secrets passed down through a surviving bloodline of master builders and enlightened rulers. The parallels between the Tartarian narrative and the Atlantean myth are too striking to be a coincidence. They are a mirror image, a story told from two different angles. One, advanced and impossible architecture. Plato describes the Atlanteans as master builders, constructing magnificent temples and harbors from red, white, and black stone with a level of precision and artistry far beyond their time. Sound familiar? We've seen the same impossible architecture in the buildings of Tartaria, the monolithic columns, the massive domes, the intricate carvings that seem to have been built by beings of a superior strength. The buildings of Tartaria are not just a coincidence. They are the physical, standing proof of the very same architectural mastery described in the Atlantean myth. They are the stone and mortar legacy of a civilization that built on a scale we can only dream of today. 2. A mastery of advanced technology. The central technological marvel of Atlantis was its mastery of a power source that relied on a crystal or a unique metal, a form of clean, universal energy. This technology was said to power their entire society. This is the exact same promise of the Tartarian star forts, a free energy grid that harnessed the atmospheric energy of the Earth itself. The star forts were not just defenses, they were the power plants of a global civilization. The Atlantean crystal and the Tartarian star fort are one and the same, the source of a universal power that allowed their world to flourish in a golden age of abundance. 3. Global reach versus a sinking island. The greatest challenge to the Atlantis myth has always been the single sunken island. But what if Atlantis was not an island, but a global civilization? What if the sinking was not literal, but a poetic description of a global deluge? The Great Mud Flood, which we saw buried entire cities, would have been a catastrophic event of biblical proportions, a sinking of the continents in a sea of mud and earth. The Tartarian Empire, spanning across continents, was not just a separate civilization, but the continental arm of the Atlantean world, its last great remnant. The mudflood was the final wave of a cataclysm that had already drowned a world. 4. The survivors and the lost knowledge. The Atlantis myth tells us that a few survivors carried the remnants of their knowledge and seeded it across the globe. This is where the story of the Great Reset finds its origin. The survivors, a group of powerful beings who possessed the knowledge of the free energy grid and the technology of the old world, were able to seize control in the chaos. The secret societies and the powerful families who engineered the Great Reset are, in this theory, the direct descendants of the Atlantean survivors. They didn't want to share the knowledge, they wanted to control it, to ensure that no one could challenge their power by building another utopian world of free energy. The cover-up of Tartaria was not a new idea. It was a continuation of a strategy that had already been put into place to hide the truth of Atlantis. By framing the legend of Atlantis as a fantastical, unprovable myth, the New World Order ensured that no one would ever look for its physical evidence in the real world. By pushing the story of a lost continent into the depths of the ocean, they ensured that no one would look for the truth in the magnificent buildings of our cities, in the geometry of the star forts, or in the old maps of Tartaria. The story of Atlantis was the perfect misdirection. It was a beautiful, tragic, and utterly distracting lie. The truth was not at the bottom of the ocean. It was buried just a few feet beneath the streets of every major city on Earth. The Tartarian Empire, therefore, is not just a conspiracy theory. It is the living proof of the Atlantis myth. It is the final clue left behind, a silent scream from a lost world, a reminder that the legend is not a fantasy, but a memory of our true origins. We are not a species that clawed its way out of the mud. We are a civilization that fell from a great height, and our entire history since then has been a story of amnesia, of a deliberate forgetting. As you drift deeper into this forbidden past, consider the implications. If we were once a civilization with free energy, with advanced architecture, and with a mastery of the natural world, what does that mean for our present? It means we are living in a world of manufactured scarcity, of controlled technology, and of a deliberate lie. The clues are still here. The buildings stand tall, the maps sit in archives, and the very memory of a more magnificent past haunts our collective consciousness. And the greatest tragedy of all is that the very technology that was once our birthright, that was once universal and free, is now a commodity, a tool of control. We will explore this stolen promise in our next chapter. Lost technology. Was free energy suppressed? We have journeyed through the forgotten maps and the colossal ruins of the Tartarian Empire, a civilization that reached a level of technological and architectural sophistication we can scarcely comprehend. We have seen the evidence of a global cataclysm, a mud flood that buried their world, and we have considered the possibility that their story is the true origin of the Atlantis myth. But now, we must ask the most infuriating and heartbreaking question of all. What was the greatest secret of this lost world, and why was it stolen from us? The answer, my friend, is woven into the very fabric of our modern life. It is the buzzing of the power lines above your head, the flicker of the light bulb in your room, the hum of every device you own. It is the simple fact that we must pay for the energy that powers our world. Because the greatest secret of Tartaria was the secret of free energy, and its suppression is the ultimate crime. Official history tells us that our technological progress has been a slow, linear climb from the candle to the gas lamp to the crude first electrical grids of the 19th century. But this narrative is a lie. It is a fabricated story designed to hide the truth of what came before. We are not a civilization that rose from the mud. We are a civilization that was brought to its knees, and the most magnificent part of our heritage was deliberately taken from us. To understand this, we must look at a single historical figure who came closer than anyone to rediscovering the lost technology of the Tartarian Empire, Nikola Tesla. Ga. Tesla was not just a brilliant inventor, he was a visionary who dreamed of a world of limitless, wireless, and free energy for every man, woman, and child. His experiments with alternating current AC were just the beginning. His true work, his ultimate goal, was to build a system that could transmit electrical power through the Earth itself, wirelessly and without loss. He believed the Earth was a vast, living battery, and he knew how to tap into its endless source of atmospheric electricity. His crowning achievement was the Wardenclyffe Tower, a massive, beautifully designed structure on Long Island, which was intended to be the first node in a global system of wireless energy and communication. Tesla's vision was a world where you could plug a device into the ground anywhere and have access to clean power, a world where everyone had abundance. But his dream was not to be. Tesla's primary financier, J.P. Morgan, withdrew his funding and effectively killed the project. Why? The official reason was financial. Morgan asked how he could put a meter on free, universal electricity. He couldn't. His business model was based on scarcity, on control, and on making a profit from every watt consumed. He was a perfect representative of the New World Order that was rising from the ashes of the Tartarian Empire. He was the force that understood that the only way to control humanity was to control its resources. This is where the Tesla story becomes the Tartarian story. Tesla wasn't inventing something new. He was re-engineering something ancient. The star forts, those geometric marvels we discussed, were not forts at all. They were the Tartarian version of the Wardenclyffe Tower. They were the receivers and transmitters of the original planetary scale free energy grid. The domes and spires on the old buildings were not just for show. They were the wireless receivers for this abundant power. The mudflood was a catastrophic event that served two purposes. It buried the core infrastructure of the old world, and it was a direct attack on its energy grid. The new powers then emerged and, in a masterful act of deception, began to dismantle and repurpose the remaining system. They stripped the domes and spires of their conductors, they removed the energy cannons from the star forts, and they began to build a new world based on the one thing that had to be fought for and paid for: centralized, metered, and controlled power. The World's Fairs were the ultimate psychological operation in this process. While millions marveled at the electric light bulbs, they were being introduced to a primitive, inefficient, and monetized version of a technology that their ancestors had enjoyed for free. The fairs were the grand stage, where the old world was publicly murdered and the new one was born. A world of scarcity, a world where the power to light your home would forever be a commodity. The suppression of free energy is not just a historical event, it is an ongoing reality. For over a century, brilliant minds who have tried to pick up where Tesla left off have been met with an astonishing level of resistance. We hear stories of patents being bought and buried by corporations, of inventors being ridiculed by the scientific establishment, and of projects mysteriously failing due to a lack of funding or suspicious accidents. This is not a coincidence, it is a policy. The New World Order cannot risk the return of a technology that would make their entire system of control obsolete. A modern world is a monument to this stolen potential. We are a civilization of immense creativity and ingenuity, yet we are chained to a polluting, fragile, and inefficient energy model. We have the technology to create a world of clean air and abundance, a world where poverty is a memory, and a world where every person has the power to create and to learn. But we are denied this future because the very system that governs us is built on the lie that energy is scarce. The star forts and the magnificent Tartarian buildings are a silent, haunting reminder of what we lost. They are a promise of a different future, a future that was taken from us. As you look at the buildings in your city, as you pay your electricity bill, and as you watch the news about energy crises, remember the truth. We are living in a world that was engineered to keep us dependent. But the cover up was not perfect. The truth, like free energy, can never be fully contained. The clues are still here, waiting for us to awaken from our collective amnesia. And the group that orchestrated this great crime, the secret societies that rewrote our history and took away our freedom, are still operating in the shadows. We will expose them and their motives in our next chapter: Secret Societies and the Rewrite of History. We have journeyed through a world of impossible architecture, stolen technology, and historical deception. We've seen the pieces of a puzzle so vast, it reframes our entire understanding of human civilization. The mudflood buried a world, the World's Fairs destroyed its last remnants, and the promise of free energy was replaced with a system of control. But for a conspiracy of this magnitude to succeed, it needed more than just chaos and deceit. It needed a master plan, a coordinated effort, and a secret group of people powerful enough to orchestrate a global act of historical erasure. This brings us to the most unsettling and fundamental truth of the Tartarian narrative. It was the work of secret societies. These are not the fictional cabals of a spy novel. These are the shadowy organizations, the powerful families, and the hidden groups that have been operating behind the scenes for centuries, pulling the strings of global events and manipulating the course of human history. The official narrative, with its kings and presidents and wars, is a mere stage play, a distraction designed to keep our eyes off the true architects of our world. The motivation of these societies is rooted in the very same power struggle we have been exploring throughout this journey. They are the ones who seized control in the chaos after the great cataclysm, and they are the ones who took the remnants of the Tartarian Empire and built a new world in their own image. The most prominent of these societies is the Freemasons. Their origins are shrouded in mystery, and their symbols are found on the very buildings that defy historical logic. Consider the neoclassical architecture of the Tartarian Empire, with its obelisks, its domes, its intricate carvings, and its precise geometry. Now, look at the architecture of the great Masonic lodges around the world, from the United States to Europe. They are almost identical. This is not a coincidence. The Tartarian theory posits that the Freemasons are either the inheritors of the lost knowledge of the Tartarian master builders, or they are the very group that orchestrated the reset. The truth may be even more complex. Perhaps there was a split, with one faction trying to preserve the knowledge while another sought to bury it forever. The symbols of Freemasonry, the square and compass, the all-seeing eye, the pyramid, are not just a secret language. They are a public declaration of their power and their connection to the old world. The famous all-seeing eye on the US dollar bill, a symbol of a hidden power watching over the new world, is a chilling echo of the Great Reset. It is a sign from the orchestrators of our modern civilization, a quiet admission that they were the ones who took over. But the Masons are not the only ones. We have the Rosicrucians, with their focus on esoteric knowledge and alchemy, which might be a distorted memory of the advanced Tartarian science. We have the Bohemian Grove, a secret gathering of world leaders and elites that meets in a hidden forest, where they perform strange rituals and make decisions that affect the entire planet. These societies are all part of the same interconnected web, a network of power that operates outside the view of the general public. The secret society's control of history was a slow, methodical process that took place over a century. 1. The rewriting of the past. They commissioned new history books, new encyclopedias, and new academic narratives that completely removed the name Tartaria and the idea of a global united empire. They invented wars, justified the destruction of buildings with tales of natural disasters, and created a new timeline that made it seem as though humanity was a primitive people who slowly progressed to the current state. They portrayed the builders of the impossible architecture as simple masons with pulleys and ropes, instead of a technologically advanced civilization. 2. The acquisition of antiquities. While the world's fairs were destroying the physical evidence of the old world, the secret societies were quietly acquiring the most valuable artifacts and technologies. The lost patents of Nikola Tesla, the unique instruments, and the advanced books of knowledge were not destroyed. They were confiscated and moved to private vaults, where they remain today, used for the benefit of a select few. The Smithsonian Institution, with its history of losing or misplacing artifacts that don't fit the official narrative, is a key part of this cover-up. The legendary giant skeletons, the very proof of the builders of Tartaria, were supposedly found and then conveniently disappeared from the historical record. 3. The orphan train and the mind wipe. We have touched on the chilling reality of the orphan trains, but now we can see them for what they truly were. A program of human re-education orchestrated by these secret societies. The children of the old world, the last generation with any living memory of the Tartarian Empire, were taken from the mud-buried cities and scattered across the country. They were stripped of their heritage, their names, and their memories, and were reprogrammed to be a subservient and unquestioning workforce for the New World Order. This was the ultimate act of historical erasure, not just of stone and paper, but of living memory. The legacy of these secret societies is a world built on lies and powered by scarcity. We are a people living in a prison of limited resources and controlled information. The Tartarian Empire and its lost technology represent a future of freedom and abundance, a future that was deliberately taken from us. But the cover-up was not perfect. The very fact that we are having this conversation, that people all over the world are looking at the evidence and questioning the official story, is proof that the human spirit cannot be fully contained. The internet, the very tool that these societies try to control, has become the vehicle for the rediscovery of the truth. The struggle between free knowledge and controlled information is the defining conflict of our time. The existence of these societies, their immense power, and their orchestration of the Great Reset mean that our history is not a tale of triumph and progress, but a story of a great fall and a persistent global amnesia. As you look at the buildings in your city, as you see the symbols of the powerful, we have journeyed through the evidence of a forgotten civilization, a world of incredible beauty and advanced technology that was buried beneath a great deluge. We've unmasked the culprits, the secret societies that orchestrated a grand historical deception. But we have yet to answer the most fundamental question of all. What caused the great cataclysm? Was it a tragic, natural disaster, a random cosmic event that gave birth to the mudflood? Or was it something far more sinister, an engineered reset, a deliberate act of destruction to pave the way for a new world order? The official story has no answer. It offers no single global event that could have buried the cities of the 19th century in a layer of earth and rubble. But the Tartarian theory offers two chilling possibilities, each one more profound than the last. The first possibility, the one that some researchers cling to, is that the mudflood was indeed a natural disaster, but one on a planetary scale. This theory suggests a cosmic event, like a near miss from a comet or a meteor shower so intense that it changed the very composition of the Earth's atmosphere and geological stability. The debris from the event, a fine clay-like dust, would have saturated the air, and when it mixed with the Earth's moisture, would have fallen as a dense, thick, mud like rain that settled in every valley and basin. This would explain the consistent depth of the buried buildings and the uniformity of the mud. Another natural possibility is a planetary wide pole shift event where the Earth's crust rapidly shifted over its mantle. Such an event would have caused immense earthquakes, floods, and volcanic activity, liquefying the ground in a process known as liquefaction, where solid ground behaves like a fluid. A pole shift would have been a chaotic event that could easily have buried entire cities. But even this natural explanation presents a terrifying reality that we are living on a planet that experiences catastrophic cycles, and that our history is not a line of progress, but a series of civilizations rising and falling. The more terrifying and more plausible explanation, however, is that the catastrophe was not an accident at all. It was an orchestrated event, a pre planned act of global destruction designed to wipe the slate clean. It was the centerpiece of the Great Reset. Remember the star forts and the concept of free energy? The secret societies who inherited a fragment of this knowledge understood its power. They knew that a global civilization running on free, ubiquitous energy was a civilization they could not control. To gain ultimate power, they had to destroy the old world and its technology. The mud flood was the result of a weaponized cataclysm. The theory suggests that a directed energy weapon, or a form of technology we can barely fathom, was used to target the Earth's energy grid. Imagine a colossal, focused energy burst that caused a planetary-wide plasma discharge, a massive electrical shock to the very core of the planet. This would have caused a cascade failure in the Tartarian free energy system. The interconnected starforts, the grand buildings, the entire network would have short-circuited in a flash of incredible energy, leading to immense geological instability. The mud flood wasn't the weapon itself, it was the geological fallout. The energy discharge would have triggered seismic events and liquefaction on a global scale. The result was a world literally turned to liquid, with cities sinking and being buried in a sea of earth. The event was not a natural disaster. It was an act of war on a scale so vast it is almost unimaginable. The engineered nature of the reset explains everything that the natural disaster theory cannot. It explains the deliberate suppression of technology after the event. It explains why the new powers immediately began to rebuild on top of the old world, using a much cruder and more centralized energy system. And most chillingly, it explains the motives of the secret societies. They had the means, they had the motive, and they had the long-term plan to turn the disaster into an opportunity. The sheer scale of this engineered cataclysm would have had a profound impact on the survivors. With their world literally turned upside down, with their buildings buried, and with their advanced technology gone, they would have been in a state of mass shock and disorientation. They would have been prime targets for psychological manipulation. The new powers, emerging from the shadows, would have presented themselves as the saviors, the ones who would lead humanity out of this new dark age. They would have provided a new narrative, a new history, and a new technology, a primitive, controlled, and profitable one. They would have convinced the survivors that the old world was lost forever, and that the only way to survive was to follow their new, centralized system. The orphan trains and the widespread re-education were not just a consequence of the disaster. They were the final step in the plan. They were a way to sever the last ties to the old world, to erase the living memory of a free and abundant civilization, and to raise a new generation that would never question the official story. The evidence we have explored, the forgotten maps, the buried buildings, the impossible architecture, the suppressed technology, and the existence of powerful secret societies all point to a single, overarching truth. The world we live in is not the result of a linear, natural progression. It is the result of a great fall, a massive act of historical and technological erasure that was either exploited or deliberately engineered. The official narrative is a comfortable lie, a story that tells us we are at the pinnacle of human achievement. But the truth of Tartaria, the truth of the mud flood, and the truth of the Great Reset tell a different story. They tell us that our history is a lie, that our potential was stolen, and that we are living in the ghost of a world that was far more magnificent than we could ever imagine. The clues remain. They are in the buildings, in the maps, and in the questions that refuse to go away. This journey into the forbidden past is not a search for a lost empire. It is a search for our true origins. And it leads us to the final debates of our time, the ongoing battle between the official narrative and the truth revealed. We will explore this struggle in our next chapter, Modern Debates, Conspiracy, or Truth Revealed. We have journeyed through a world of buried secrets and historical lies, laying out the evidence for the Tartarian Empire, the missing maps, the global mud flood, the impossible architecture, the suppressed technology, and the secret societies that orchestrated a grand historical reset. For a mind open to the possibility, the clues are everywhere. But now, we must face the most powerful force working against this truth, the official narrative and its most potent weapon, the label of conspiracy theory. Turn on any mainstream media channel, ask any university historian, or read any encyclopedia, and you will be met with a similar dismissive response. The Tartarian theory is scoffed at, ridiculed, and categorized as a fringe belief for those who are uncritical and misled. Academics and official institutions claim to have all the answers, and they offer a simple, comforting narrative that brushes aside every single piece of evidence we've explored. The maps of Tartary are simply a product of European ignorance. They were a vague placeholder name for a landmass they had not yet explored, a general term for the nomadic tribes of Central Asia, not a unified empire. The term simply faded from use as cartography became more accurate. The mud flood is easily explained by the natural processes of urban development. Cities are built upon themselves over time, roads and sidewalks are raised, and building foundations naturally settle. The half-buried windows are just a quirky design choice, a stylistic feature of the 19th century known as daylight basements. The impossible architecture is a testament to the ingenuity of the Industrial Revolution. New technologies like steam engines, cranes, and mass-produced steel made it possible to build grand, ornate buildings at an astonishing speed. The World's Fair buildings were made of cheap, lightweight stuff and were always meant to be temporary. The claim that they were torn down is simply a matter of public record. The lost technology of free energy is a fantasy. Nikola Tesla's ideas were never proven to be viable on a commercial scale, and they were rejected by financiers for simple economic reasons, not due to a grand conspiracy. Giants are a myth. The biblical and historical accounts are folklore, and the discovery of giant skeletons has been proven to be hoaxes or misidentified animal remains. This is the narrative we are told to believe. It is simple, logical, and it does not require us to question the very foundations of our reality. It is the story of a linear, progressive history that leads us from a primitive past to a glorious present. But the modern debate is not happening in the hallowed halls of academia. It is happening online, in forums, and on video platforms where independent researchers are using the very tools of the New World Order to expose the cracks in the official story. Their arguments are a direct, point-by-point rebuttal that challenges the narrative on its own terms. The case for the maps. The old maps are far too detailed to be just vague placeholders. They often label distinct cities and regions within Tartaria, and encyclopedias from the same period describe a powerful, unified civilization, not a collection of warring tribes. Their sudden disappearance is a glaring historical anomaly that the official story cannot adequately explain. The case for the mudflood. The sheer uniformity of the buried floors on a global scale cannot be explained by local urban development. It would be a monumental coordinated effort to raise every street in every city to the exact same degree. Furthermore, old photographs from the 19th century show buildings being excavated from mounds of dirt, not just having new sidewalks placed on top of them. The official explanation is a lie of convenience. The case for the impossible architecture. The logistics of building the World's Fair white cities in just 2 or 3 years with a supposedly primitive workforce is a modern miracle in itself. The intricate details, the sheer volume of material, and the scale of the buildings suggest that they were not built but repurposed. Their immediate demolition, often by fire, makes no economic sense. It was not a celebratory act. It was a desperate attempt to erase evidence before the public could ask too many questions. The case for the lost technology. The suppression of Nikola Tesla's work by powerful financiers is a documented historical fact, not a theory. The official reason that it wasn't profitable is precisely the point. The New World Order did not want a world of free energy. They wanted a world of controlled, metered, and profitable energy. The technology was not lost, it was stolen. The case for the giants and a deliberate reset. The most powerful argument of all is the overarching coherence of the theory. All the disparate anomalies, the maps, the mud flood, the architecture, the technology, fit together into a single, cohesive, and terrifying picture. It explains why a unified, technologically advanced civilization would vanish without a trace. It explains the rise of the secret societies and the psychological manipulation of a post-cataclysmic world. It is the missing link that ties every historical contradiction together. The official story is fragmented, illogical, and riddled with unexplained anomalies. The Tartarian theory, while audacious, is a unified theory of history that explains it all. The battle for truth. The modern debate is not just a clash of ideas, it is a war for our collective memory. The official narrative is defended by institutions that have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. The Tartarian theory is a grassroots movement of independent thinkers who are willing to risk ridicule to seek the truth. The internet has become the battlefield. Old maps and photographs, once hidden in dusty archives, are now available to everyone. Independent researchers from around the world are sharing their findings, challenging each other's theories, and building a new crowdsourced history from the ground up. This is a battle for our past, but it is also a battle for our future. Because if the Tartarian theory is correct, then our entire modern world is a monument to a great deception. We are not the inheritors of a glorious age of progress. We are the survivors of a civilization that fell, and we are living in the ruins of a much grander world. This understanding changes everything. It forces us to question every single thing we have ever been told. As you awaken to this new reality, you will begin to see the clues everywhere. The debate is no longer an abstract academic exercise. It is a personal journey, a search for the truth of our origins. And the final clues of this great conspiracy are the very essence of humanity itself. We will explore this ultimate revelation in our next chapter, Tartaria's Legacy, Clues to Humanity's Real Origins. The first clue to Tartaria's existence lies in old maps. From the 16th to the 19th centuries, European cartographers consistently labeled a vast swath of Asia as Tartary, or the Great Tartary. This immense region stretched from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean, and from the Ural Mountains, northern borders of India and China. While the name itself was a general term for the lands inhabited by Turkic and Mongol peoples, some researchers believe it points to something more specific and significant. The official narrative suggests that Tartary was a collection of nomadic tribes, and the name simply fell out of use as modern nation-states were established. However, a closer look at the evidence reveals a different story, one of a highly sophisticated, unified culture. The most compelling evidence for a Tartarian civilization is the architecture. Across the globe, from the United States to Russia and beyond, there are thousands of magnificent, highly ornate buildings that defy the historical timelines assigned to them. These structures, often referred to as Old World or pre-1900s buildings, share a striking similarity in their design. Massive scale. They are often immense, with high ceilings and grand staircases built to a scale that seems disproportionate for the time period and the stated purpose. Intricate details. The facades are adorned with elaborate carvings, statues, and symbols that are highly consistent across different continents. Advanced engineering. Many of these buildings exhibit a level of engineering and construction that would have been incredibly difficult, if not impossible, with 19th century technology. They were built to last, with precision cut stones and a mastery of materials that is rarely seen today. Uniform style. The consistent use of domes, arches, columns, and Greco-Roman motifs suggests a single, unified architectural style, a global aesthetic that points to a shared origin. These buildings are often misattributed to a variety of cultures and historical periods. For example, the magnificent St. Petersburg and Moscow cathedrals in Russia, the New York Public Library in the US, and the cathedrals of Milan and Florence in Italy all share this Tartarian architectural style. The question is, who built them, and why are we told they were constructed by disparate, unrelated cultures? One of the most profound aspects of the Tartarian mystery is the apparent technological disconnect. Many of the buildings feature elements that seem to indicate an advanced level of technology, such as ornate metalwork that is incredibly precise and complex, massive columns and blocks of stone that would have required cranes or anti-gravity technology to move, underground tunnels and passages that are far more extensive than what would be needed for a standard sewer system. Some researchers even propose that these buildings were not just homes or places of worship, but were part of a global energy grid. The domes and spires, they suggest, were designed to harness atmospheric energy, a form of free energy that has since been suppressed. The intricate carvings and symbols on the facades were not just for decoration, but were part of this sophisticated energy system. One of the most controversial but compelling theories related to Tartaria is the mudflood. This theory suggests that a cataclysmic event, possibly a global flood of mud and debris, buried the lower levels of many of these grand buildings. Proponents of this theory point to the following evidence. Buried ground floors. In many of the old world buildings, the basement or ground floor is actually a fully functional, ornate floor that has been buried up to the windows or even higher. Mismatched entrances. The main entrance to many of these buildings is now on the second or even third floor, with a modern staircase leading up to it. This suggests the original ground floor entrance was buried, identical phenomena across continents. This mud flood evidence is found in cities all over the world, suggesting a global event rather than a localized one. The mud flood theory suggests that a past civilization was wiped out or reset, and the survivors were left to inhabit the upper floors of the buried buildings. A new history was then created to explain the new reality, with the buildings being attributed to a later, less advanced culture. The Great Reset, erasing the past? The Tartarian theory posits that our history is not what we have been taught. It suggests that a global, highly advanced civilization was either destroyed or systematically reset. The remnants of this civilization, the grand buildings, were then repurposed and a new historical narrative was created to hide the truth. The reason for this great reset is a matter of speculation. Was it a natural disaster, a cataclysmic event that wiped out most of humanity? Or was it a deliberate act, a systematic suppression of knowledge and technology to control the masses? Why do so many grand buildings across the world share the same architectural style? Why is the technology required to build these structures so far advanced for the time period they are attributed to? What happened to the missing history of the Great Tartary? Is it possible that we are living in the ruins of a greater civilization and our history has been manipulated to hide this fact? The Tartarian mystery is not just about a lost civilization, it is about the very nature of our history and who we are. By questioning the official narrative, we open ourselves up to a world of possibility and a deeper understanding of our own origins.